A young woman wandered into a cursed mountain cave, and from that moment, her life unraveled. A vengeful spirit, burned and broken, clung to her every step, chasing her through narrow tunnels and haunting her restless nights. Each breath was stolen by fear, each shadow a reminder of what stalked her. Her body weakened, her mind fractured as the ghost's icy presence pressed closer, eager to claim her. Just when despair sealed her fate and his hands nearly closed around her, a stranger emerged from the darkness. Strong and unyielding, he stood between her and the spirit, turning terror into a battle where survival hung by a fragile thread. My name is Hannah, a student who wanted nothing more than a quiet weekend in the Rockies after a long week. Daniel thought exploring the mountain cave would be fun, but the closer we got, the more uneasy I felt. The entrance yawned wide, swallowing the daylight, its edges slick with damp moss. I pushed my glasses up and followed reluctantly, my short hair sticking to my forehead in the cold mist. Inside, the sound of our footsteps bounced back at us, too sharp, too loud. The walls seemed to close in, dripping water that fell like measured ticks of a clock. My chest tightened, and though I said nothing, a shiver crawled up my spine, telling me we should never have entered. The deeper we walked, the more silence pressed against us, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. Daniel shined his light ahead, trying to keep the mood light, but I caught something in the corner of my vision. A figure half hidden in the stone's shadow, tall and burned, his skin cracked like coal left too long in the fire. His hair floated in the still air, his hollow eyes dripping dark tears that didn't fall to the ground but drifted, suspended. My lips parted to call out, but no sound escaped. By the time I blinked, he had vanished, leaving only the stench of smoke and damp ash. Daniel laughed when I stumbled, but I could see the tremor in his hand as he gripped the flashlight tighter. The passage narrowed until the walls brushed our shoulders. Cold spread through the stone, numbing my fingers even as I hugged myself. Then came the whisper. My name stretched thin across the dark, and I felt breath colder than ice spill against my neck. I turned, and the ghost was there, closer, eyes burning black, his body seared and broken, yet somehow whole. His gaze rooted me in place, my knees weakening as if he was pulling the strength from my bones. Daniel tugged me forward, but the spirit glided with us, sliding effortlessly along the cave's walls, never falling behind. Rocks above shifted, sprinkling grit on our shoulders, and every sound echoed like a threat. We stumbled into a chamber wider than the others, a pool of stagnant water shimmering faintly in the beam of light. My foot slipped, sending me crashing to the ground, my glasses knocked askew. When I looked up, the ghost hovered inches away, his hair brushing my cheek, his mouth opening with no sound, only a gust that froze the air in my lungs. My vision darkened at the edges, my body refusing to move. Then the silence shattered with the heavy steps of another man. A tall stranger rushed in, his coat long and weathered, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. His name was Aaron, and without a word, he placed himself between me and the specter, his frame solid against the shifting fog of the dead. The ghost surged forward, his charred hands stretching out, but Aaron held firm, his presence alone forcing the spirit back. The chamber howled as wind tore through it, stones cracking in the walls, shadows thrashing like living things. Daniel pulled me up, his face pale, sweat streaking his forehead, and together we stumbled toward the narrowing exit. Behind us, Aaron clashed with the entity, each strike of power flashing light across the cavern like silent lightning. I risked one glance back, and in that flicker of glow, Aaron's eyes locked with mine, steady and unyielding, before the stone ceiling caved with a roar. Daniel dragged me into the cold night outside, the mountain calm again, yet my lungs still stung with frost, and I knew that cave hadn't finished with me. In the woods, a young woman sought peace, but instead faced the curse that had never released her. At a remote cabin, strange sounds crept across the roof, fog pressed against the windows, and a shadowy spirit forced its way inside. Fear consumed her as every corner turned hostile, leaving her trembling and sleepless once more. With friends by her side, she realized even daylight couldn't shield her. Just as the ghost reached closer, the mysterious man who once saved her stood firm again, driving back the darkness. His presence gave her hope, yet the spirit's grip remained unbroken. I didn't plan on stepping into another nightmare so soon. After what happened in the cave, I promised myself I'd keep things simple. Go to class, meet friends, avoid dark corners. Yet something clung to me, not in plain sight, but in the way silence stretched too long at night, or how shadows gathered thick around the edges of my room. I kept telling myself it was just trauma, that my mind was making echoes where there were none, but my reflection in the mirror seemed slower to follow than it should have. Daniel tried to cheer me up, dragging me along with his friend Melissa to a small cabin his family owned in the woods. He thought a change of scenery would help, and honestly, I wanted to believe him. Aaron, the stranger who saved us in the cave, agreed to join too. It felt strange having him there, like he carried a piece of that darkness in his eyes, but I trusted him more than I wanted to admit. He never said much, yet whenever he looked at me, it was like he already knew the weight I carried. At first, it was almost normal. Melissa made terrible coffee, Daniel played the same old playlist, and I sat by the window pretending I was fine. But the woods pressed against the cabin with a quiet that wasn't peaceful. I noticed it first at dusk, when the trees shifted as though a breath ran through them. Melissa brushed it off, saying the forest was alive, but Aaron's jaw tightened, and I caught him glancing at the tree line too often. I knew then we hadn't left the curse behind. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the cabin sounded deliberate, every gust of wind too sharp. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, until I heard something faint above us. Slow steps across the roof, dragging, pausing, then moving again. My throat locked as I nudged Daniel awake. He laughed quietly, thinking I was paranoid. But when the sound scraped directly above our heads, even he froze. Aaron was already standing in the corner, as though he hadn't slept at all, eyes fixed on the ceiling like he'd been waiting. We gathered in the living room, half whispering about raccoons and branches, but the lie didn't hold when Melissa pointed at the window. Fog rolled against the glass from the outside, thick and white, though the night had been clear. Within it, a figure pressed forward, a man-shaped blur with eyes glowing faint and hollow. My heart thrashed as the glass trembled under its touch, leaving trails of frost across the pane. Aaron stepped forward, his presence steady, and the frost recoiled, but the figure didn't leave. It lingered, as if testing how far it could go. I couldn't stop shaking. My skin burned cold, my breath shallow. Melissa clung to my arm. Daniel tried to put on a brave face, yet his voice betrayed him when he suggested we just turn on the lights. Aaron shook his head. The way he said it made me feel we weren't supposed to draw attention, as if light wouldn't protect us this time. The figure dissolved into mist, slipping away, but I knew it hadn't truly gone. The silence after was worse, a waiting silence, heavy enough to press on my chest. We tried to stay awake together, talking softly, clinging to ordinary things. But exhaustion hit us all eventually, and I must have drifted off, because I woke with the sense that something had entered the cabin. My glasses were crooked on my face, and through the blur, I saw movement near the door. The ghost was inside. Its form was sharper than before, skin scorched and cracked, eyes leaking darkness that seeped into the floorboards. I couldn't scream. My body froze, every nerve screaming inside while my mouth stayed locked shut. Aaron moved before anyone else stirred. He didn't touch it, didn't fight the way people imagine. He stood firm, speaking low words I couldn't catch, and the air around him shifted. The ghost recoiled, its edges fraying like smoke pulled by the wind, but it didn't vanish. Instead, it turned to me, dragging the chill of its presence across my skin. My vision swam as I stumbled back, and Melissa rushed to steady me, whispering that we had to leave now. Daniel grabbed a lantern, his hands trembling too much to hold it steady, and we moved toward the back door. The spirit followed without sound, gliding through the cabin as though walls meant nothing. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, each step feeling like it dragged me deeper into the nightmare I thought I'd escaped. We burst into the woods, branches snapping underfoot, fog curling around us like hands reaching. Aaron stayed behind just long enough to hold the entity back, then caught up. His breath even, his expression unchanged, though his eyes burned with something fierce. We didn't stop running until the fog thinned and the cabin was swallowed behind the trees. My chest ached, every inhale sharp, but I forced myself to keep moving. Finally, we reached the dirt road that led back toward town, and only then did Aaron slow. The spirit hadn't followed. The woods were quiet, too quiet, but free of that icy weight, for the moment at least. Standing there under the dim glow of a single lamppost, I realized something I hadn't dared admit. This wasn't just about the cave anymore. Whatever had marked me had no intention of letting go. The ghost wasn't tied to one place. It was tied to me. And while Aaron's presence kept me alive tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that every step forward was only leading me closer to what it really wanted. I never thought a quiet evening walk could twist into something so unsettling. The streets of my neighborhood were usually safe, familiar, even boring, but that night the air felt heavy, as if the silence itself was watching. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, yet every sound behind me landed too close. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. I tried to distract myself by remembering conversations with Daniel earlier that day. The way he laughed too loudly at nothing, how Ava teased him for it. Normal things, simple things, yet they slipped away the moment I noticed a faint figure at the edge of the park. It didn't move the way a person should, its presence more of a weight than a body. My chest tightened, legs urging me forward, but my curiosity refused to let me run. I turned my head once more, and it had drawn closer, though I never saw it take a step. Ava's voice echoed in my memory, her warning that the house near the old chapel carried secrets no one should touch. Maybe this was connected. Maybe I had stepped too close without realizing. The figure wasn't content to linger. Each flicker of a street lamp revealed it behind me, sometimes tall, sometimes small, never holding the same shape for long. I couldn't breathe right. I pressed my hand against the cold metal of a gate just to steady myself. Somewhere inside the panic, I heard Daniel calling my name, his tone sharp, almost urgent. When he reached me, I wanted to believe everything would stop. But the moment his hand touched my arm, the shadow slid nearer, stretching toward us like smoke seeping under a locked door. Daniel's jaw clenched, eyes darting as if he too could sense it. For once, I wasn't alone in my terror. We rushed toward the chapel, not by choice, but because every other path seemed swallowed by darkness. The air inside was damp, the walls lined with forgotten carvings, words neither of us could read. Ava had followed, her breath unsteady, her face pale, yet she refused to leave us. The three of us stood in silence, listening to the shift of the floorboards above, though we knew no one else was there. The spirit did not storm in with rage. Instead, it circled us, unseen yet felt, brushing the back of my neck, stirring the dust in small spirals across the floor. It was like it wanted us to know it was in control, that escape was nothing more than a thought we clung to. My heartbeat drummed against my ribs, my vision blurred, but Daniel whispered steady words, keeping me anchored. A sudden thud broke through the air and the heavy wooden door slammed shut. Ava screamed, but quickly covered her mouth, as though giving it sound would feed the thing. Daniel stepped forward, no weapon in his hands, only his own resolve. He raised his voice, firm but calm, speaking words I barely processed, telling the spirit it had no place with us, no right to stay. The walls trembled. The carvings glowed faintly before dimming again. The pressure around my chest eased as if something unseen loosened its grip. The shadow withdrew, not gone but pushed away, hovering outside, waiting for another moment to strike. I fell to my knees, drained, trembling, but grateful for the thin slice of silence that followed. Walking home afterward felt strange, every corner holding a question I didn't want answered. Ava kept glancing behind, Daniel kept close by my side, and I carried the weight of what had just happened. I told myself it was over, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The lesson carved itself into me that night. Fear isn't only in what we see, but in what lingers just out of reach. Safety is fragile, and sometimes survival depends not on strength, but on who refuses to let go of your hand when everything around you wants you lost. It was supposed to be a normal afternoon. I had been running errands, carrying a small bag of groceries, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet as soon as I stepped past the weathered fence of the old property at the end of the street, the air shifted, almost as though I had walked through an unseen veil. I paused, debating whether to keep walking or turn back, but my pride wouldn't let me retreat. The path curved toward the rear of the property, lined with broken windows and vines that seemed too alive for their own good. I told myself it was just an abandoned house, but the silence pressing against me didn't feel empty. It felt deliberate. A figure appeared at the edge of my sight, still and faint like smoke. My body tensed, skin crawling, breath shallow. I wanted to scream for help, but no sound came. My first step backward only made it clearer. The thing wasn't just there, it was aware of me, feeding on the dread that poured out of every nerve in my body. I stumbled against the fence, hoping to escape, but the boards were brittle and gave no strength. Before panic swallowed me completely, I heard hurried steps rushing down the path. He arrived, out of breath, eyes sharp, not carrying anything but determination. Relief cut through my fear, though not enough to erase the weight that loomed behind me. The presence shifted, circling us like it had no body but endless reach. I saw the way his jaw clenched, the way his hand stayed steady on my shoulder, as though grounding me to something real. And then Ava came too, her face pale but defiant, refusing to let me stand alone. For a moment, I felt less like prey and more like someone worth protecting. The house groaned, as if alive. Windows rattled, shutters slammed, though no wind blew. The figure swelled, stretching into something taller than the trees, only to shrink again into a smear of shadow crawling along the wall. It had no voice, yet I heard it in my chest, whispering, threatening, pulling at every ounce of fear I tried to suppress. He spoke, not loudly but firmly, telling me to look at him, not at it. His calmness was unnatural, but I clung to it, repeating his words inside my head until they drowned out the pressure of that whisper. Ava pressed closer, her hand cold, her breath uneven, and together we formed a fragile circle against the unseen. The thing tested us, pushing closer, brushing past my ear with a rush of air that made me shiver. I flinched, almost collapsed, but he kept me upright. His presence wasn't forceful. It was steady, unyielding, as if he believed stubbornness alone could make the spirit break. And strangely, it began to recoil, flickering against the cracks of the house like water drying in the sun. With one final shudder, the shadow withdrew into the corners, shrinking back into the structure it had claimed for so long. The silence that followed was suffocating, but different, like an echo left behind, rather than a threat waiting to strike. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours, weak but alive. Walking away was harder than it should have been. Every step felt watched, every sound sharper than usual. Yet Daniel walked close enough that his arm brushed mine, Ava trailing just behind, and for once I didn't feel entirely defenseless. The house faded behind us, but the weight of what lingered there clung stubbornly, unwilling to be forgotten. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. I couldn't explain what it was or why it chose me, but I knew it wasn't finished. The lesson carved into me was simple. The ordinary hides more than we care to see, and sometimes survival isn't about strength. It's about who chooses to stand beside you when the unseen presses in. I used to think old motels were just a cliché, the kind of place you pass on the highway and never glance at twice. But that night I pulled into one, rain beating against the windshield, and something about the faded neon sign felt less like shelter and more like a warning. I told myself it was just exhaustion, but the unease settled in before I even shut the car door. Inside, the front desk was empty, a bell rusted from use. I tapped it once, twice, until a woman appeared, her smile stretched a little too long, her eyes holding something I couldn't name. She slid the key across the counter, never breaking that stare, and for reasons I still don't understand, my hand trembled when I reached for it. The room smelled faintly of mildew and something sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. I locked the door, checked the window twice, but unease clung to me like damp air. The mirror over the dresser reflected the room accurately, but when I leaned closer, I swear I saw movement behind me that didn't belong. I told myself I was tired, that sleep would erase the unease, but the night stretched on. Every creak of the floorboards above me felt deliberate, too heavy for coincidence. My pulse quickened with every sound until the air grew colder, and I realized I wasn't imagining it. When the shadow came, it didn't appear with a dramatic entrance. It simply unfolded from the corner, stretching upward until it filled the wall, its shape shifting with every blink. My body froze, my throat locked, and all I could do was clutch the blanket tighter, as if that thin fabric offered protection. The doorknob rattled suddenly, and I nearly screamed. But it wasn't the shadow. Daniel forced his way in, his eyes searching mine before darting to the wall. He moved with urgency, but no panic, as though he had been expecting this. Relief and confusion collided inside me, leaving me unable to move. Behind him came Ava, her voice low but firm, chanting something I couldn't understand. She stood at the foot of the bed, her hands trembling yet steady enough to hold her ground. I watched her face pale as the shadow shifted, testing her words, but not breaking through. Daniel reached me, his hand gripping my wrist, grounding me as though pulling me back from the edge of drowning. His presence was the first solid thing in a night where everything else bent and twisted around me. I focused on his voice, calm, sharp, unshaken, as he told me not to look at it anymore. The shadow resisted, swelling against the corners of the room, rattling the mirror until it cracked. The sound was sharp enough to make me flinch, but Ava didn't stop, her voice rising, her fear buried beneath stubborn resolve. I clung to Daniel's steadiness, refusing to let the whispering pull me away. Then, almost as suddenly as it arrived, the shadow collapsed inward, sucked back into the corner like smoke retreating into itself. The room fell silent again, the air lighter but still unsettled, leaving behind only the faint hum of the broken neon sign outside the window. When it was finally over, I could breathe again, though my chest felt bruised from holding in the panic. The three of us sat there in silence, not celebrating, not relieved, just listening to the quiet as if it might betray us again. Later, when I stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried that heavy, charged stillness. I knew this wasn't the end. What we faced inside that motel wasn't gone, only waiting. But I also knew I wouldn't face it alone anymore, and that fragile truth was the only comfort I carried into the night. I never planned to join them on that late-night drive, but something about the way they insisted made it hard to say no. We were 4 in total, crammed into an old car with the windows rolled down, the air thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. It felt like nothing more than a reckless adventure until we turned onto that forgotten road. The trees closed in, taller and darker, their branches clawing at the headlights. I pressed my forehead to the glass, trying to convince myself it was just nature playing tricks, but the deeper we went, the heavier the silence became. No animals, no crickets, not even the wind, just the steady hum of the tires over cracked pavement. When we reached the abandoned chapel, none of us spoke. Its roof sagged, and the doors leaned as if they had been waiting too long. Something about the place drew us in, even when every part of me screamed to stay behind. I trailed after Daniel and Ava, my chest tight, while Marcus lingered near the entrance, his hand brushing against the wall as if testing it. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rot. Stained glass windows were shattered, their colors scattered across the floor like dried leaves. My steps echoed far louder than they should have, bouncing back at me until I couldn't tell if the sound belonged to me or something else moving in rhythm. I tried to steady my breathing, but each inhale grew shallow, as if the chapel itself resented us for disturbing it. We reached the altar, and that's when it began. A flicker along the back wall, almost like a shadow, though there was no light behind us. I felt the shift before I saw it, the weight of being noticed pressing down until my skin prickled. Ava whispered my name, and when I turned, I realized the shadow wasn't alone. More shapes stretched from the corners, blending into one form that seemed to pulse with every heartbeat in my chest. Panic struck fast, my legs heavy as if I had been planted to the floor. The figure closest to me leaned forward, its face blurry but its intent sharp, and for one dizzy moment, I thought it was trying to speak. My ears rang, my head spun, and all I wanted was to shut my eyes and wake up somewhere else. Daniel's hand caught my arm, steadying me before I collapsed. His voice was low, firm, guiding me toward the exit, while Marcus shouted from the doorway that something was blocking the path. I turned, and sure enough, the shadows had stretched across the doorway like a curtain, their edges trembling but holding. Ava stepped forward, her lips moving in a hurried rhythm, her eyes locked on the shifting wall of darkness. She wasn't fearless. Her hands shook, her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. I watched her face harden with determination I didn't know she had, and slowly the dark began to peel back, as though her words unstitched the very fabric of what held us in. The doorway cleared just long enough for Daniel to pull me through. Marcus followed, and Ava stumbled behind us, her breath ragged, her eyes wet. The instant we crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut, and the silence outside felt almost too clean, too sharp after what we had just endured. We stood under the night sky, shaken, not daring to move farther than the car parked at the edge of the lot. No one spoke for a long while. My body still buzzed with fear, but beneath it lingered a strange sense of clarity. Whatever that place was, whatever waited inside, it hadn't wanted us to leave. As we drove away, the road seemed endless, the forest refusing to release us until the trees finally thinned. I stared back through the rear window, half expecting to see the chapel shrinking into the distance. But there was nothing. Only darkness stretching endlessly behind us, and the gnawing truth that what we escaped wasn't gone. It was patient. And patience, I realized, was the most terrifying thing of all. I told myself it was just another weekend away, a chance to breathe and reset, but the truth was I already felt uneasy when we arrived. The cabin sat deep in the hills, too far from neighbors, too far from cell service, and the silence carried a weight I couldn't shake. Daniel dropped our bags by the porch while Ava teased me for looking like I wanted to run back to the car. Inside, it was warmer, though not in the comforting way you expect. The air was thick, heavy, almost charged, and I swore the floor creaked in places where no one stepped. Marcus found the old fireplace and worked on lighting it, while I tried to laugh off my nerves, but my own voice sounded hollow. I wanted to believe the place was just old, nothing more, but deep down, I already knew better. The first night passed slowly, every sound dragging me from the edge of sleep. I could hear movement in the hallway, a soft shuffle, a whisper of weight pressing the floorboards. I held my breath, counting seconds until the silence returned, convincing myself one of the others had gotten up. But in the morning, Daniel swore he hadn't left his bed, and Ava admitted she felt something brush her shoulder when no one was near. We agreed not to talk about it, though the fear lingered in every glance. That afternoon, Marcus suggested a walk through the woods, but I stayed behind, telling them I wanted time alone. The truth was I didn't trust the cabin when it was empty. Shadows moved differently here, stretching too long, curling along the ceiling as if they belonged to someone unseen. My pulse quickened each time I caught them shifting just beyond the edge of my sight. By the time the others returned, the house was colder than before, and they noticed it too. Ava touched the wall and pulled her hand back as though she had pressed against ice. Daniel's jaw tightened, and for once, he had no explanation. When Marcus reached for the door, it resisted, the wood groaning as if something pressed from the outside. That was the moment we all understood. This wasn't just an old house. The night that followed blurred into a string of moments I can barely piece together. The fire died no matter how often we fed it, and the windows frosted over from the inside. I tried to keep calm, but the sound of footsteps above us grew steady, deliberate, like someone pacing, waiting. When the ceiling moaned, dust falling into my hair, I realized there shouldn't have been a second floor at all. Ava clung to me, her breath shaky, while Daniel stood firm between us and the stairs that didn't exist the day before. His voice was steady, grounding me when I felt my chest tighten with panic. He moved slowly, his eyes locked on the shadows bending near the ceiling, and for a moment, I believed he could hold them back with will alone. Marcus whispered prayers I couldn't understand, his face pale, his body trembling as if he already knew what we faced. The pacing stopped, replaced by silence so sharp it rang in my ears. Then the wall to our left bowed inward, as though something pressed hard from outside. The wood splintered, but just as fear threatened to break me, Daniel's hand found mine. His grip was warm, solid, pulling me toward the door that had refused us before. Ava and Marcus followed, every step heavy as the air thickened around us. This time the door gave way, swinging wide to reveal the night sky. We stumbled out, gasping, the cold air burning my lungs as if I hadn't breathed in hours. Behind us, the cabin groaned once more, then stilled, quiet as though it had never moved at all. We didn't speak until we reached the car, and even then, no one dared to say what we all felt. The road back was long, but none of us looked behind. Still, in the reflection of the window, I thought I saw the outline of the cabin lights flickering in the trees, as if reminding me that some places don't let go just because you leave.